Hey everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar. So today we're going to discuss the challenges of scaling DevSecOps. So if you are in the world of DevOps or security, you know that combining the two of them can be quite challenging. I mean, we have the security department, we have the DevOps or the development and the operations department, and then we want to combine all of them. And another important thing is that we want to do it not only in one team or one department, we want to do it across the entire organization. And this is another part of the challenge. So today we're going to discuss the benefits of DevSecOps, how that basically works and what are the main items. And then we'll sort of try to understand what's holding us back. I mean, we see a lot of customers, we see a lot of organizations that are struggling to implement DevSecOps, and we'll discuss some of the barriers for entrance to that area. And then we'll try to just eliminate what's holding us back just one by one. So we'll go through 5 main steps to scaling DevSecOps. So what is the DevSecOps approach? The idea is really to take the security teams that are sort of very far away, even in the logical sense, from the development, and integrate the security aspect and the security practices into the DevSecOps, into the DevOps processes. So basically the idea is to use any methodologies that are already used in DevOps. So, we usually speak about agile, we speak about delivering small pieces of code, and the idea here is really to implement or bake in the security aspect into the development lifecycle. Again, we're speaking about DevOps in general. So the idea is to automate the security processes if possible. So security, of course, is something that you have to analyze, you have to understand. It's not it cannot be easily automated, but we do believe that very large parts of that can actually be automated, and this is what we aim for. Again, this is sort of the best response for the bottlenecks that we all feel. That we have these older security models that we try to stick to, because at the end of the day, we do want everything to be secure. We do want to deliver to our customers this secure software. But we also want to do it in an agile manner that is more of like 2019 rather than 10 years ago. And we feel a lot of times that these security processes are sort of holding us back. So we want to stick to DevSecOps. Now let's discuss what's the common way or the traditional way of handling security vulnerabilities. So traditionally, and in many organizations, by the way, this is still the case. So the security teams, they analyze and they prioritize the vulnerabilities. So they look at different reports, they can look online, maybe they have all kinds of systems, like static analysis systems that they are looking into, and they try to understand and analyze each one of the security vulnerability. Then the next step would be to either send email or to open a ticket to the developer to actually remediate or resolve the vulnerability. This ticket will usually contain all the security vulnerability details, maybe the suggested fix. But then the developer actually has to do the job of researching again whether, if, for example, the security person told them you have to upgrade to version 2 of that software, maybe that version actually breaks something behind the scenes. And as a developer, I cannot upgrade to that version. I have to find another solution. So this opens another sort of round of investigation. And we see that closing the loop on the resolution or the analysis is very hard, mostly because the security teams and the development teams, they don't usually speak to each other, and also because they have very different goals, right? As users, they have different goals. So for example, a security team, they want the code to be secure. They want each and every one of the vulnerabilities to be resolved as fast as they can. And then we have the developers, and the developers, they want to deliver new features. And we sort of have this friction, and we sometimes have the DevOps in the middle that wants everything to be very stable. They also want to upgrade versions as fast as they can. And we see this as a very big challenge, and this again is causing a lot of friction within the different departments. And again, as we mentioned, we believe that the solution to that in most cases can be found within DevSecOps, sorry. So what are the business benefits of DevSecOps? The idea is really to implement the security processes into the development lifecycle. So it's both having a security person sitting within the developers, sitting with them in the same team, understanding the development processes, and then implementing the security part according to the existing lifecycle. And the benefits are have within them. So the first one would be cost reduction, right? We have a lot of different versions that are being deployed to production every day. At the end of the day, if we find the vulnerability as early as we can, we actually reduce a lot of costs. We don't have to retest, redeploy the analysis that we discussed, like the analysis that the security person is doing, and then the analysis that the developer is actually doing. This is completely eliminated. So a few hours a day can be saved by just having this communication between the teams and having DevSecOps implemented. Then we also have speed of delivery, right? If we don't hold back the existing processes because of security, we have a lot faster implementation. So we can think of examples and organizations where the security person is a bottleneck, right? So for example, the security person wants to validate every open source component that is being deployed to production. And of course, this slows down the process. The developers cannot operate and deploy new versions by themselves. They have to get this approval. So sort of eliminating this bottleneck and achieving the speed of delivery that we need. Also, it's secure by design. So if you have a security person within your development team, he will make sure that the vulnerability is not being sort of enforced or stopped or rejected only when it comes to production, right? It will actually be eliminated a lot left in the life cycle. So even when you design the code, even when you design the new component, you choose the actual open source components that you want to use, you choose them secure in the beginning, in a secure way. And we also have this open discussion between the teams, which of course causes a lot of benefits to the business. If we have that open discussion, we can eliminate the friction that we discussed before. And again, this has a very high benefit to the organization itself. So what are the operational benefits of DevSecOps? And by operational benefits, we mean the actual day-to-day benefits that you will get if you will implement DevSecOps, whether if it's as a security person, a developer, or DevOps. So first of all, versions are up to date. And this is important mostly in open source for security reasons, but also for functional reasons. I mean, we have some details about open source vulnerabilities. So for example, 97 of the open source vulnerabilities that are being detected already have a suggested fix. So they already have an actual version that fixes that vulnerability. If your versions are up to date, you're a lot less likely to be exploited by any vulnerability that is found. We see a lot of times customers or users that are being exploited with vulnerabilities that were published and they have a fix for 2 years, 3 years now. And it's just that the organization didn't update the version as they should have. So versions that are up to date is a great operational benefit. We do see customers and users starting to implement that, but of course it has to do with a lot of automated testing. Now, of course, up-to-date versions, they don't only have this security aspect or security benefit. They also have the functional benefit, because if you're up-to-date, you get the latest features, you get the latest bug fixes. So being up-to-date with your open source or any other piece of code is definitely a very big benefit. Nearly zero rework. So if from the beginning, from the moment that the developer gets the task, they will choose the secure open source component, and they will not choose some open source component that has already vulnerabilities, they will not need to eventually change it, modify it. I mean, it's secure by design. So they already chose the right component in terms of security. They chose the component that doesn't have any security vulnerability, that doesn't contradict with the company's policy, and of course, the one that has the actual functional benefits that they're looking for. Then the next step would be, of course, early identification of vulnerabilities in the code. So we discussed shifting left, and I think that the scenario that I just described is the most left side that you can think of. Because if you think about it, the first time that the developer meets the open source component or the vulnerability in the code would be when they actually choose to use that component. If we go after that, so the next step would be maybe the repository itself or the image registry or even the deployment. But definitely it has a lot of benefits to identifying the vulnerabilities early. And the last step would be enabling a culture for constant improvements. And this is the idea with DevOps, but again, it's also the idea with DevSecOps. So it doesn't have to be perfect in the first place. We have to start automating where we can and when we can, and then implement it to the other parts of the microservices or the other part of the organization as we go along. So this is another important step. Now, so what's actually holding us back? I mean, what are the challenges in DevSecOps? So eventually, most of them are very similar to the DevOps challenges that we're speaking about. So the first one is the cultural and the communication challenges. So if today we have 2 or 3 different teams that are working on security, development, and operations, or even a security team and a DevOps team, there is a very big gap between them. Not only because it's 2 different teams, but also because the fact that they are responsible for different things within the organization. So we have to bridge that gap and actually define one goal that they will all aim for, other than having different teams. The next one is that scaling is not easy. So maybe there is something that you can implement in one of your teams, take one security team, one DevOps team, and combine them together and have this DevSecOps working with one team, but maybe in another application, it will be completely different. And eventually in the enterprise, you have to scale it. You have to make sure that you have a process and you can implement it to other teams as well. And this is a very big challenge that we face. The next one is moving to the cloud. So again, security when moving to the cloud is quite challenging. I mean, security people know security work, whether if it's on premises or in the cloud. But there are new tools that they need to adjust to. And this can be challenging for some of the security teams. The next part is automation. So we discussed the fact that security is something that is not very easy to automate. So it's not like functional tests, right? That we can automate quite easily. We actually have to take the research part, we have to take the scanning part, so if we scan for existing vulnerabilities, and then probably the most important part is we have to automate the remediation as well. And this is not really straightforward, so you have to really start step by step, and this is another very big challenge. Then we also have the challenges that the developer face. So, for example, security awareness. So development are not very aware of security vulnerabilities. They mostly want to release the next feature and move on to their next task. So security isn't the top of their concerns. Maybe they are not even aware of security vulnerabilities. It's not something that they want to actually deal with day to day. So we have to raise the awareness among the developers. Then maybe or probably they're also not familiar with security tools because security used to be the security team's problem and now it becomes also their problem. So they have to get familiar with the actual tools, the actual language for security vulnerabilities. Of course, it's also very hard to implement it into the life cycle. So every development team or every development department probably has sort of a different life cycle when releasing a version. So maybe it's a different CI/CD tools. Maybe some of them are using Jenkins and some of them are using TeamCity. Maybe some of them are using GitHub, but some are using Bitbucket. And you have to actually implement the security aspect in the life cycle, no matter which tools you're working with. So you have to make sure that the security part that you automate actually exists in every one of these tools that your teams are using. Then security for developers is also a sort of a mindset. So we have to make sure that developers understand the security aspect and that they understand that this is really important for the organization. So whether if it's telling them about past mistakes that we made, about different exploits, and telling them all kinds of stories to understand and really take this security aspect into account. And then we also have the resolution and remediation. So in the last slide, we discussed how hard it is to actually remediate automatically and to actually resolve a vulnerability. It's not just a matter of upgrading to the latest version, of course. You have to make sure that you have automated tests to actually make sure that it didn't break anything. So it's not just about verifying that the security vulnerability is remediated, but also that your software is still functioning as it should. So in order to start driving DevSecOps in the organization, we have a 5-step method. Of course, it's the main steps that you have to take in order to start driving DevSecOps in your organization. So the first one is to know the goal. And the goal is usually just to bake security into the existing workflows. So you have to actually identify what your workflows are. I mean, which repository you're working with, which tools you actually have, which part of the process is already automated, and then put the security within that. So identifying the processes is a very important step. For example, if we speak about development, we have the IDE. So whether you're using IntelliJ or VS Code or Eclipse, one of the things that you can do is you can automate and get security alerts within the IDE itself. So this is a process. The process is coding in the IDE. And the security aspect of that is getting alerts in the IDE. The next part would be the build stage. So the build stage is an existing workflow, right? Whether you're using Jenkins or TeamCity or Circle CI, you're actually building the software as part of the DevOps solution. So a great way to start would be to actually fail builds based on known vulnerabilities. So if there is a known CVE, a known existing vulnerability, and you have that in your code, you can fail builds. So it's an existing process, and then you bake in the security into that. If we speak about container registry, we also make sure that your container registry is secure. So you can implement vulnerability scanning in the container registry itself. And then we have the deployment. So deployment is sort of the last gate before production, and you have to implement the security aspects there as well. But the idea is really to shift left, to start in the development and then have the deployment as a last step to actually enforce your organizational policies. The next step would be to determine where to automate, right? So we have the build stage, then we have the automated tests or the manual tests. We want to detect the security issues as early as we can. We want to remediate them, and then we want to keep on monitoring. So it's one thing to actually implement security in the life cycle, but it's another thing to monitor my existing production software and verify that there are no new vulnerabilities that are being detected. So again, the first point to start would be probably for most companies in the build stage. So failing builds based on known vulnerabilities can be a very good start if you're already using automated tests in the build stage. And then moving on to testing, detecting issues, remediating, and monitoring as you go along. So again, shifting left, both the detection and the remediation. So we discussed the detection a little bit. I mean, scanning for known security vulnerabilities is a very important step. And we basically believe that you should do this as part of the requirement or the design stage rather than the final testing in the release stage. An important thing to do is to automatically remediate vulnerabilities. And of course, this is not a straightforward or an easy task, but it's definitely worth considering. So not only detecting vulnerabilities automatically, but also remediating them automatically. Like, for example, having automated pull requests opened for actual fixes that are available. And then the last step would be to continuously improve. So in DevOps in general, we have this continuous integration. We have continuous delivery, continuous deployment, continuous testing. But what we want to achieve eventually is continuous improvement. We want to start with something. Maybe it's not perfect. Maybe it's not the best process. Maybe not all the organization is already using these methods. But you want to start small, and then you want to continuously improve the processes. So this is a very important step. So don't wait until everything is perfect, until everything is automated. The idea is actually to start somewhere and then improve from that point. So thank you for joining, and I hope you enjoyed it.